the invisible force destroying everything. It was 178 years ago, 2 weeks ago. It was on June 1st, 1846, I think it was. I'd have to go back and look, but it was 178 years ago, if you do the math. French astronomer and mathematician Urbain Le Verrier calculated the existence of an unknown planet. Turned out it was Neptune, but nobody knew Neptune existed. But he was able to see Uranus. So but Uranus's orbit wasn't behaving the way that it was supposed to. So he postulated and did the math and said, I predict that you will find a big planet right here. And he, found this particular spot in space. And sure enough, they looked and there was Neptune. A lot of Americans are watching our political dysfunction right now and wondering, what is the dark force that is twisting things so badly? I mean, what's going on with this? We have, for example, clear majority of Americans tell pollsters that college should be free and student debt should be eliminated. But Congress can't do anything about it. Clear majorities of Americans, I'm talking well over 50%, say that assault weapons should be entirely banned. And yet Congress can't do anything about it. Social Security, Americans say, should be expanded and rich people should pay into it like everyone else does. And again, we can't get that done. $15 an hour should be a national minimum wage. The minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2009. The morbidly rich, and Congress does nothing, the morbidly rich who pay an average 3.4% income tax should instead pay the top rate that was, set for them. And yet they don't, because Congress won't act. Americans should have quality, comprehensive national health care system. The majority of Americans believe that, and yet it doesn't happen. Climate change. The majority of Americans say climate change is a threat to our nation and government must act, but nothing's going on. Massive corporations. The majority of Americans say have too much power, political and economic, and should be broken up. And yet, nothing happens. The majority of Americans say government should intervene in the pharmaceutical marketplace to stop drug price rip-offs, but nothing happens. The Citizens United decision by 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court should be reversed either by Congress or expanding the court, say the majority of Americans, and yet, so far, nothing has happened. Homelessness, the majority of Americans say, should be addressed by the government, either building or incentivizing the construction of affordable housing. A majority of Americans say taxpayer money should not be used to subsidize religious schools, yet that's something that is happening over the objection of most Americans. The majority of Americans say abortion should be legal with reasonable restrictions per Roe v. Wade, but it's not in half the states. The majority of Americans say unions should be strengthened and limits put on them by Republicans on the Supreme Court that allow corporate union busting should be abolished. And, the corporate union busting. But none of these things happen. Here's another example. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Gutierrez, just came out, Antonio Gutierrez, just came out and said that governments should ban advertising, not just for fossil fuel companies, but for any products that use fossil fuels. In other words, gasoline-powered cars, lawnmowers, motorcycles, airplane rides, cruise ships. Just ban that stuff. Stop promoting anything that uses fossil fuels. And so far, the city of Edinburgh, Scotland, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and Sydney in Australia have taken them up on it, and they've banned that kind of advertising in their cities. It's a big deal. So why would that not happen here? I mean, we did this with tobacco back in the 70s. And Gutierrez is saying that basically, carbon dioxide from fossil fuels is at least as, killing as many people as tobacco. And, has the potential to kill a lot more people. So what is this dark force? What is the Neptune that is distorting the orbit of Uranus? I think most Americans intuitively know that it's big money, but what they don't know is that the big money can do this because Clarence Thomas was the deciding vote on the Supreme Court after, for years, he had been wined and dined by right-wing billionaires And then finally in 2010, they said, we'd like you to vote for Citizens United. And he said, sir, yes, sir. Thank you for putting my adopted son through a fancy, ridiculously expensive academy. Thank you for buying my mother's house and other houses on the block to upgrade her neighborhood. Thank you for taking me on multi-million-dollar vacations to Indonesia and Malaysia, and I'm just all over on your super yacht and flying on your private jets. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll give you the right to bribe politicians. And here we are. And the Republicans aren't even bashful about this corruption. Ron DeSantis, who wants the fossil fuel industry to bankroll his 2028 campaign, or at least appears to want to, how else do you explain this behavior? Recently ordered the words climate change removed from all government policy statements and documents. And he refuses to acknowledge that climate change may have played a role in the wild weather that Florida's been having in the last couple of weeks. It's just been insane. Massive floods and heat waves and things. Breaking records left and right. And now the Atlantic hurricane season is starting. And yet Ron DeSantis is saying, there's no such thing as global warming. He's lying to the people of Florida on behalf of the fossil fuel billionaires because, the biggest of them is a major funder, probably the major funder of the entire network that supports right-wing candidates and Republicans. He knows which side his bread is buttered on. And this is all because the Supreme Court legalized political bribery, which is just wrong. Excuse me. I still have a little bit of COVID. I'm sorry. I lay this out in my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, that this dark force, this invisible planet that is deforming our politics. And by the way, this is not by and large happening in other countries. It is to a smaller extent in the United Kingdom, and there are people complaining about that. Political bribery's gotten easier in the UK over the last 20 years. But for most democracies, most advanced democracies, billionaires and big corporations don't have this kind of power. Scotland, Edinburgh, Scotland, in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, saying, no, we're not going to allow fossil fuels to be advertised on television in our cities, Sydney, Australia. All of those countries have very specific, explicit laws that say you can't bribe politicians. It's a crime. Now, it's still illegal to clumsily bribe politicians, right? When they caught Senator Menendez with, bars of gold in his closet and $100 bills stuffed in the pockets of his clothes from, some foreign country, I guess it was. That's pretty grim. But, if he had been smart, he would have said to them, just put it into my leadership PAC. And then when I retire, I can take the money out and give it to myself. Because that's one of the cool little tricks with these leadership PACs, is that you can actually exploit that money after you leave office. But, he wanted it all right now. I guess he was just greedy. And this is assuming that the charges against him are sustained. Let's note that he's innocent until proven guilty. But boy, oh boy. And the same thing with the Democrat Henry Cuellar down in Texas, who's being accused of this. But, this stuff that we call campaign contributions and PAC contributions and dark money, particularly the dark money, this is an extraordinarily corrupting force in American politics. And it's not doing any favors to this country. It's not helping. It's not a good thing. It is extraordinarily destructive. And that's why we need to overturn Citizens United. And we need to do it, as soon as possible, frankly. Biden has a new immigration plan coming out. He's going to announce it today. This is amazing. I have a cousin, or a niece, a cousin's daughter, who married a guy, an undocumented immigrant who had opened a restaurant in the little town in northern Michigan where she lived. They fell in love, they got married, they had a couple of kids, And then the local cops or whatever discovered that he was here without documentation. And we even got Senator Bernie Sanders involved in trying to keep him in the country. But, ICE deported him. They arrested him and deported him. And so she moved to Mexico. She's been raising their kids in Mexico, my niece, to be with her husband. And this is tragic, right? So what Biden is going to do today is he's going to say, if you're married to an American citizen, as of Monday of next week, if you're married to an American citizen, and that's about 500,000 people in the situation that my niece was in, or my cousin or whatever, second cousin once removed, I don't know what you call that, my cousin's daughter. If you're married to an American citizen, you can get in line for a green card. I think this is wonderful. This is such a good thing.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And about 500,000 people will benefit from this, the immigrants themselves, and 500,000 spouses, and millions more who are members of their families.